Welcome back to Moby Motion. It's great to have you. Now in this video, I'm going to show you how to back up your Asustor NAS to any other NAS and exclude certain file types. So for example, I'm going to be using this to keep an offsite backup of my important animation files. These are the .blend files and the rendered image files, but I'm going to be excluding the simulation caches because these can be tens of terabytes. And if the worst case scenario happens and I lose them, I can always reproduce them from the blend files. It'll just take a bit of simulation time. I'm going to be backing up to a Synology NAS, but you can equally run this to any RSYNC compatible server. And actually, if you're comfortable with Portainer, Bash scripting, Crontab or Crontab UI, you can also run this workflow from any RSYNC compatible NAS to any RSYNC compatible NAS. Now this is part 2 of this video. It assumes that you already have Crontab UI up and running on your NAS. If you don't already, make sure you check out part 1. I'll also link it in the description below. So that's where we're going to be picking up from. Quick disclosure before we dive into the meat of this tutorial. Now, Asustor and Synology have both been kind enough to provide me with NASs for review for this channel, and I don't have to send either of them back. But no money has ever changed hands, and I'm under no specific obligation to make these videos. I'm making them because I want to, and I can say whatever I want. So you'll see these before anyone from Asustor or Synology. With that out of the way, let's see how we can use Crontab UI to run really powerful scripts on a schedule. So you can actually use any 2 NASs, but for me, I'm going to be going from Asustor to Synology. And for these NASs to be able to talk to each other securely and reliably, we're going to be setting up SSH keys. The alternative is that you can put your password in every time, but that's kind of rubbish. Or you can hard code your password in, but that's very insecure. So SSH and encryption keys really are the way to go here. We're going to start off on the Asustor NAS or the NAS that you want to copy files from. We will need to SSH into the NAS, but it will be very brief. In ADM, open services, go to terminal and enable it, and take note of the port that you've specified there. Open up a terminal on your computer. So on Windows, you can use PowerShell and you'll want to SSH into the device. You'll do this by simply writing SSH, your username at the IP address and hitting enter. If you've chosen a weird port, so I've chosen a weird port for security reasons, then you'd have to add the argument -p and then the port that you specified. And this command will also be in the description. Once you're SSH'd in, you will want to generate a pair of keys. And you'll do that by typing ssh-keygen -t25519. Hit enter. This will save the files to the default SSH key locations, and the keys won't be protected by passwords themselves, so be very careful with them. But you do need this if you're going to automate using them kind of as passwords to establish the secure connection between the 2 NASs. Now, on the Synology NAS or on the NAS that's going to be receiving these files, you want to make sure that RSYNC and SSH are enabled. We're going to enable RSYNC on the Synology by going to Control Panel, File Services, RSYNC, check Enable RSYNC Service, and take a note of the port. So I'm going to set a weird one again for security, and I'm not going to share this port with you because I don't trust any of you guys. I'm just kidding. Choose any port that you like. For example, you can pick a random number between 100 and 15,000, let's say. Then click Edit RSYNC Account and add a user. So this will ask you for a password, and it's important to keep it somewhere secure like a password manager, but we won't be using this for the RSYNC. We'll just be using the user, and we'll be using the SSH keys instead. Click Apply. Now we have to copy our public SSH key that we created on the Asustor, and we need to copy it to the Synology into the folder where it expects these SSH keys to be stored. Now, the simplest way to use this, and the way that I would recommend, is to use the command line. Again, I'll include this command in the description down below. It is ssh-copy-id-p, then you put in whatever port you used for RSYNC on the receiving NAS. So for me, the Synology. Then you'll need to have your username, @ the IP address of the other NAS. Now, this is going to work magically as if they're on the same network, because both devices are on tail scale and they're on the same tail net. If you don't already have tail scale set up on both of these NASs, then make sure to check out my tail scale tutorial. Alternatively, you can transfer this file without the command line. You can either use a mounted folder on a computer, like a Windows computer, or you can use the UI. But on the source NAS, so here the Asustor, we're going to navigate to our home directory. This is either home, the top level folder, or user homes and then your username. You'll see a folder called .ssh. You should see a freshly created pair of keys. The one that ends in .pub is the public key. And then you can either download the file from ADM, or you can transfer it somehow using the computer that's accessing the NAS. Then on the Synology NAS, you'll also have to find a very specific folder. This is going to be in homes with an S. Then the username of your RSYNC user, and then .ssh. And if these folders don't exist, you'll have to create .ssh. And then inside this, you need a folder called authorized keys. It's authorized with a Z _ keys, the American spelling. And then inside this, you can drop in the public key that you created on the Asustor. Now, a step that's kind of optional, but will be very helpful to troubleshoot things down the line. It's best practice to check that the SSH connection works before we start putting things that rely on SSH into our scheduled jobs. So hopefully you still have the terminal that's SSH'd into your Asustor NAS. If not, you can open it back up and connect the same way that we did before. And we're going to run a very simple command. We're going to try to SSH into the Synology NAS from the Asustor NAS without a password. And this is going to test whether these keys have worked as expected. And if that runs correctly, that means your SSH keys are synchronized correctly between the two NASs, and they can communicate safely and securely. Now let's put this all together and run a test script in Crontab UI that's going to rely on RSYNC and the SSH keys. I'm going to put this in docker/crontabs, and I'm going to make a new folder inside here called scripts. And this is where I'm going to keep all of my scripts so they're nice and tidy, all in the same place. So we'll create a new file here. You can use the command line for this, or you can mount the Docker shared folder on your Windows machine or your computer, and then create this with any text editing program that you like. And you'll also need a small test file that we'll try to copy to make sure everything is working. And there are a few things that you'll have to change in this command for it to work for you. So the start of it is okay. You can copy and paste rsync -avh -stats -e, and then in quotes there's ssh-i. That points to your key. So you probably will have the same name if you didn't modify my command earlier, but you might have given your key a different name. You'll have to change that here. Then -p and your Synology SSH port. That is if you've changed it from default. If you've kept it default, you can leave that out. Then you'll need to point to the test file that you want to transfer over. Now be careful here so you're not tripped up. This isn't going to be the data path globally to your entire Asustor NAS. This is going to be what the path looks like to the Crontab UI container, and this will differ depending on how you've mounted it. So you might remember in video 1 that we set these specific mount points, which basically tell Docker this folder on the Asustor NAS is going to look like this other folder inside the container. So you have to give that second path what the container thinks the path is. For me, that's /data/YouTube NAS HDD. And here you can create a tiny test folder and make sure the path is correct. Then you'll need your Synology RSYNC username at the Synology IP. I'm going to be using the Tailscale IP because that'll behave very much like they're on the same network, colon, and then in double quotes, you should specify where you want this file to go. You have to make this script executable because we will be executing it. If you're still SSH'd in, or if you're comfortable with SSH on your Asustor NAS, you can chmod +x and then the path to your script that you want to execute. I found a lazy way to do this that allows you to do it without SSHing into the NAS, and that is by inserting this command into the Crontab UI command, so that on the schedule, every time it runs, it makes sure it's executable, or it makes it executable if it's not before running it. The choice is up to you when you run this. But now let's make sure it is running in Crontab UI. So navigate back to your Crontab UI browser tab. For me, this is my local Asustor IP address, /8158. This will be whatever you set that port to when creating your container. We're going to click Add New Job. I'm going to call this Simple RSync Test. So because this scripts folder is inside the Crontabs folder, and Crontabs is mounted to the Crontab UI container as /etc/crontabs, the scripts folder is going to be /etc/crontabs/scripts/ your file name. So the command in full is going to be ssh/ that path that we've just identified. So if you want to do the chmod here, the command will be chmod +x, the exact same path to the script. Then you'll need two and signs. Then you'll need to sh the script. These will also be included in the description. Under schedule, you can click hourly. I would recommend checking enable error logging and then click save. And then in Crontab UI, there's an option to run now. Now click this and see what happens. Hopefully in a couple of minutes, your Synology NAS or the second NAS should have a file appear where you asked the file to appear. If there are any issues, the Crontab UI has this red box, and if you hover over it, it'll stay STD error, that's standard error, and there's a darker blue box next to it, STD out, standard out. These will be very helpful in debugging this if there are any issues. If the file doesn't transfer, have a look in those logs and ask your favorite language model, either Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT. They will be able to help you with this, and you can explain everything you've done so far. And if you do have any issues and you're able to solve them, leave a comment down below so others can learn from them. Or if you have any problems that you still can't fix, also leave a comment down below and I will do my best to help you, or maybe others in the community can also help out. Now we're ready to move on to a real script that's going to do some backing up for us. If you look in the description, I will also have a script that you can copy and paste, but be careful with it. Read it first. I would recommend, even if you're not good at shell scripting, skimming through it and make sure that you have a rough idea of what it's doing so that it doesn't do something unexpected on your machine. You'll also have to look at all of the first arguments, and you'll have to change them to your specific need. So source and base will have to be where you stored your data that you want to save, and not where my data is, for example, but you'll have to change all of these. Now this will be completely free and it'll allow you to perform this rsync operation and exclude specific file types and exclude folders with certain substrings in the name. Now I've recently launched channel memberships, and channel members will get an enhanced version of this script. And what this is going to add is that it's going to have a lock file, okay? And this is going to prevent the script running multiple times at once. It's very useful if you want the rsync operation to run for a very long time without interrupting it, and you want to check every hour that it's still running. And also the advanced script for channel members is going to thread this so that you're performing multiple rsync operations at the same time. And this is going to speed things up if you have tons of files. Another feature is a timeout. For example, you might want to run this script every hour, and in that case, you might want it to time out at 59 minutes. For me, I want this to run every 12 hours, and I have the timeout at 11 hours 50, so that before it runs the second time, it makes sure the first process has ended cleanly, and that way you don't have multiple RSync operations always starting. But there's an alternative way for you to have those advanced features without signing up as a channel member. You can get a language model to write this for you. I would only recommend this if you're able to at least read bash scripts so that you know roughly what it's doing. I wouldn't want some LLM code to mess up your computer, but if you're able to verify it yourself, then it can also implement this functionality and any other functionality that you want to implement that isn't there in my script. So you're going to take the script, either my free one, my members exclusive, or the script that an LLM has written for you, or the script that you've written. But I think if you're writing bash scripts, you're less likely to need this tutorial. You'll take this and you're going to put it in the same scripts folder. So the very same scripts folder that has that very simple script. And then we are going to schedule this backup as we scheduled things before. We're going to click new to add a new cron job. I'm going to name it backup Asustor to Synology. The command, so what I used was chmod +x, the script path, and then 2 and signs, and then sh and the script. And this will allow you to make sure that it's executable every time. Then you'll want to set the schedule for your backup operation. I initially set this to every hour between 3 a.m. and 5 p.m. Now that sounds kind of arbitrary. It's because I misunderstood this, but I thought that my video editor and producer, Madhuwantha, couldn't download tons of stuff during certain hours in Sri Lanka due to his internet plan. And so this was designed to keep the NAS more available when he does have internet. But it's an example of how you can set up these really powerful rules in Crontab. We're going to enable error logging again, so check that box and click save. Now, very important, you have to click save to Crontab, otherwise this won't run. Now let's make sure it is running as intended. In Crontab UI, click run now. Now hopefully this will start the backup, and there are a couple of different ways to check that it's working. One of them is to open your task manager or resource monitor, whatever ADM calls it, and check for network activity away from the NAS. Also the NAS that's receiving these files, you can check and make sure that there is network activity to it. You can also look at the standard error and the standard out to look for any errors or any output. RSync should print stuff to standard out, and so you should be able to see what RSync is doing. Also, you should be able to see any error messages. Again, if there are any issues, leave them as a comment down below. I'll do my best to try and help. But if you want a really accurate and really quick answer, I'd recommend asking an LLM to help you troubleshoot. And that's it. So you now hopefully have this scheduled RSync job that goes between one NAS and another, and it can follow these really sophisticated rules. Now, before I leave you, a few notes on timing and some kind of errors to look out for. RSync is very clever. When it tries to copy a file, but it can see that it's already there, it won't copy it again. It'll know that it's the same file based on the timestamp and the file size. And depending on the options you use, it can even do a checksum. But I'm not going to do a checksum because that would add so much time to these backups. Now, depending on how many files have changed since the last backup, this operation might take ages. And so you have to account for this. You have to realize that every time this cron job runs, it's going to start a new RSync process to copy files over. So if your last job is still running, you're going to end up with 2 RSync jobs which might clash with each other, which might cause some problems. There are 2 ways to work around this. One is very simple and possible with the free script that I've included. But very simply, you can just space out your cron jobs very far apart. So I had to back up about 3 terabytes over the internet across different cities. And that only took like a couple of days, maybe a week. And then future syncs should be much faster than that. So depending on the amount of data that you have to back up, you can schedule your jobs very far apart. maybe every week. And then maybe later, when the changes are smaller, you can bring this down to every day. But let me talk about how my members only script addresses this. It addresses it in two different ways. And I think this gives you the best balance of performance and robustness, but without having any issues because of this clashing. And these two things are a lock file and a timeout. The lock file means that every time you try and start this job, it'll check, oh, is the RSync job already running? Oh, it is running. Okay, I'm going to chill out. And then if it realizes that the RSync job isn't running, that's the only time where it will start. Now the timeout is also helpful because it stops jobs leaking into others. So let's say you wanted to make sure the sync was running every hour. You could have a timeout for 59 minutes, and then you know that every hour, no RSync job will be running, and so it'll start a new one. But actually these two things work together really well, because if you start a sync job every hour, you lose quite a bit of performance, because for RSync to get warmed up, to even get started, it has to generate a list of files on both devices. And so sometimes it might take 5 minutes, sometimes it takes 20 minutes just for a real transfer to start. And so what my members only script does is this. It has a lock and a timeout. The timeout is just shy of 12 hours, which is a long time. It gives it a chance to warm up and carry out these transfers over multiple hours. And it also has the lock file. And so what you can do is schedule the backup job every hour. Even though you have this timeout for 12 hours, the every hour just makes sure that it's running. It makes sure there's no long periods where you're not backing things up. Most of the time, when you get to the hour, Crontab will start this script. It'll see, oh, it's already running because of the lock file, and then it'll chill out until another hour. I hope all that makes sense. Happy to answer questions about this and the kind of quirks that I found down below. I'd also recommend the first time you restart your NAS, this should get up and running again, but for me it didn't because I had done something wrong. The way I've talked you through this now, you shouldn't have the same issue that I did, so it should start again when you restart your NAS, but something that's worth checking. Hope you found this helpful. Leave any comments down below with any questions that you have, and I'll do my best to answer them. If you enjoyed this, I also think you'll enjoy my review of the 6-bay Gen 3 Asustor Locker Store, which you can find here.